Greetings, everyone. You have your ticket? You don't have one? No problem. Just hit the subscription button below. Come on in. Hey guys, I titled this video that I want it to be you know weapons free, nonviolent, but Jesus told me I had to do it, and so I want you to hear me out through this entire message, and then you'll understand why I make such a bold statement. Okay, and I'm going to back it up with some truths that you need to know about, especially people of color, copper colored Israelites, but also the public in general. Just hear me out, and then you'll understand why I have the position that I have in terms of, the importance of being able to defend yourself by having the right to have a weapon. And I know that a lot of drama is going on right now because of all the violence that's being perpetrated throughout the country. And the politicians who are jumping on, this whole get rid of the guns and put in stricter gun laws and etc. Well, I want to share with you some facts, some historical facts. And this is mainly for copper colored people. Because the Second Amendment, that says that you have a right, to carry arms to defend yourself, was not always applied to you. And you need to understand that even if you were a free person of color in America at the time that the Second Amendment was written, it did not apply to you. America had every intention for you to stay unarmed, but you exclusively. I'm going to back that up, with some facts. So in 1777, when that law or that Bill of Rights was put into play, white Americans were allowed to have guns. They were exempt from laws restricting them having guns. But free people of color, I'm not talking about those of us or those of our ancestors who were enslaved. I'm talking about those who were not enslaved. I'm talking about in 1777. So they may have been enslaved prior to that, because remember, some of the states started, passing laws to abolish slavery, right after the Revolutionary War. States like New York, Massachusetts, etc. Okay? So they could have been slaves prior to, but after they were free, they were still people of color, although the Bill of Rights stated that American citizens could carry weapons, people of color were not allowed to. Now, let me share something with you. There was a case. It was the state versus Elijah Newsom. And this was in the year of our Lord, 1840, okay? In 1840. Now, you're going to have to bear with me a little bit because I want to read this to you. But I want you to listen carefully, okay? And once I read this to you, I think you're going to have, hopefully, a different perspective of why it's important, that you do not give up your right to bear arms, guys, okay? But let me read this information to you, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to share with you why Jesus told me, that I have no choice, all right? Just, and of course, I'm using Jesus because I know that's who they use. Yeshua told me I have no choice, okay? And quite frankly, if you are a believer, whatever you may call yourself, whatever umbrella of belief you may be under, title-wise, Christians or whatever, he told you the same thing too. And I'm going to prove that to you, and I'm going to back that up. But you're going to have to give me a minute because I want to give you some additional historical facts on what happened, with the case of the state versus Elijah Newsom, okay? And here we go. I say, nor do we perceive that the Act of 1840 is a violation of either the article of the Bill of Rights, which have been referred to. The third article forbids the granting of exclusive privileges or separate emoluments, but in consideration of public services. Its terms are clearly not violated. It is so in spirit. If it is, we are as much bound to declare the act unconstitutional as in terms as it was so. And by the way, this happened because this black man had a shotgun and they didn't want him with a shotgun, okay? And so he was arrested and prosecuted for having a shotgun. The Act of 1840 imposes upon free men of color a restriction in carrying of firearms, from which the white men of the country are exempt. Is this a violation of the third article in spirit, or is it such a palpable violation as will authorize the court to declare it void? If so, then is the whole of our legislation upon the subject of free Negroes void? From the earliest period of our history, free people of color have been among us as a separate and distinct class, requiring from necessity in many cases separate and distinct legislation. The relation of the master and the servant, of free or bond, of white and colored, excluded the idea that the latter, meaning the colored, ought or could be safely admitted to testify against the former. So blacks could not testify against whites in 1840, just so you know, okay? Accordingly, in the year of 1762, an act was passed which excludes all colored persons within the fourth degree from being heard as witnesses against white men. In 1777, it is, in almost so many words, reenacted and still remains upon our statute book unrepealed. This was the code at the time of our Constitution was formed, and the statute of 1777 was framed by many of the men who aided in forming the Constitution. From the time of the first enactment to the present, innumerable cases have been tried in our various courts in which white persons and colors have been parties in litigation, and in which the testimony of the colored witnesses would have been important, and yet in no instance has the constitutionality of the Act of 1777 been questioned. It is admitted that if the Act of 1840 does violate the spirit and the meaning of the third article, talking about the Second Amendment, it cannot be sustained because the legislature have passed other acts equally infringing it. But it is believed that the long and acquiescence under the Act of 1777 by all classes of society, legislative, judicial, and private, has given the exposition to the third article of the Bill of Rights, which is obligatory on the courts. The extent and the operation of this article was brought under the consideration of this court and the case thereof. And I could go on reading and reading, but the long and the short of it, it was just saying that free person of color was convicted due to the course of the law of a misdemeanor and was unable to pay the fine imposed on him. And the court should direct the sheriff to hire him out a public attorney to any person who would pay the fine, to auction him off to anybody who would pay the fine. So in other words, you can enslave him now because he's a prisoner. Okay, because they found him guilty of carrying a gun. Now, if somebody wants to come in and pay, we'll put him up on auction. And if you want to pay, his fine, then he can be your slave until the time that he's worked off that fine. Now, I say all that to you because I want you to understand how important it is that you fight for the right to have the right. And let me say this while I'm thinking about it. White people to have the power to enforce unjust laws. Blacks don't even have the power to enforce the law. And a while back I mentioned, give an example. Giuliani, former mayor of New York, made a statement when they were talking about laws and what was just and unjust, and he pretty much said, if you don't like the law, change the law. So they can literally take and enforce unjust laws, and you don't even have the power, or we don't have the power, let me be clear, to enforce just laws. But I just want you to think about it. Here this man, was thinking that he was protected under the Constitution because he was a free man of color. Yet, he was in prison and sold off as a slave and had to get an attorney, or someone had to get him an attorney just to get him off the slave auction block for the right to have the right to defend himself and his family and his property, which is what the Second Amendment is intended to do. And it's also intended for the government not to enforce rights on you that are unconstitutional. Now that message is to everybody. That's why the Second Amendment was put into play. And I don't know you people, you have people saying, well, you were talking about assault weapons and semi-assault. Look, if America does not want semi-automatic weapons, assault weapons on the market, there's an easy solution to curtailing that. Just make selling of the ammunition to go into those weapons illegal. Ultimately, they're going to run out of that ammunition. Then what they're going to do with those weapons are going to be rendered non and void. But they're not going to pass those kind of laws because they know what that would mean to the average white American. In other words, the average white American will be in revolt in the streets as there were in 1840 when Elijah Newsom wanted to have the same right that any white gun-carrying person would have. But he was deprived of that right. There were laws on the book. And let me share something else with you while we're here. Then I'm going to get to the topic, I promise you. Just stick with me. Here, just a couple of more minutes. This is the state, again, versus Elijah Newsom. If you can see that, let me put that up here for you. Okay? The Act of Assembly 1840 entitled Act to Prevent Free Persons of Color from Carrying Firearms. Okay? And they were saying that it was unconstitutional to prevent them from doing it, although they were enforcing it. As they're trying to make it unconstitutional now for us not to be able to protect ourselves. And we saw examples of what happens when a madman killer want to go into a place and start slaughtering people this past weekend. And if somebody, in that Walmart store had a weapon and could have, fought off or at least impeded upon, that vicious animal, beast. Even Donald Trump called him a white supremacist beast. Wow. But they could have neutralized him, and maybe half the people who were injured would not have been injured or killed, would not have been killed. If one of those individuals had a gun in their possession. And I know some of you, I don't believe in guns and guns create violence. Look, a gun in and of itself is not going to be any more harmful than a knife within itself. I have a handgun and I have a pocket knife. Looking for it to see if it was around here. Okay? And that knife is no more threatening to anybody on my person than that gun is on my person, except I decide to utilize that gun in an unjust way. So blaming it on guns, guys, is a dangerous thing, especially for us as people of color. As history has proven time and time and time again, if we're disarmed and there are vigilante groups out here who decide that they want to rid themselves of the copper color people, we are going to be eliminated. And so all of you do-gooders, all of you, I used to call them flower people, the 60s, 70s, flower people. You need to go sit down, because here's what I find also equally interesting. The first time you're feeling threatened, who do you call? I know who you call. You call the police. Why do you call the police? Because they have weapons. So don't tell me you're so anti-weapon, why can't we all just get along? That's only when it's convenient for you and these politicians to build an agenda around, something that they feel they can galvanize to get their asses elected. And so once they get elected, and all of a sudden that wolf in sheep clothing all of a sudden reveals itself. Now I'm going to close this video. And for you Bible believers who believe in Yeshua, the Bible, just so you know, okay? And I'm going to read what I got highlighted. I'm going to let you take a look at it, and you can freeze frame that when you get a moment. But here's what it says. Then said he unto them, but now he that had a purse, let him take it, and likewise his scrip. And he that had no sword, which means weapon, let him sell his garment and buy one. That is Luke chapter 22, verse 36. So yes, Yeshua did tell me that I had to get a weapon. He told me the time would come that I needed to sell the shirt off my back if I needed to get a weapon. Now, why do you think that's so? Do you think Yeshua saw the future and knew what the future would look like? Did he see this day and time that we're living in? Did he see the 1700s? Did he see the 1800s? Did he see the 1900s? Is he seeing the 2000s, the 21st century, and warning us, warning you? So I'm just a voice crying out in the wilderness telling you, look, either you defend yourself or be prepared for carnage at your expense, at your fault, because you disobeyed the Most High. Thank you for listening. DFG, love you guys. Talk to you later. Bye now.